Relations between China and Britain started over 2 centuries ago. It is a long and complicated relationship and has gone through many ups and downs. But in 5 phrases, we can capture the headlines in this relationship. It started with a failed diplomatic mission. There was unjust war, then well-timed diplomatic upgrading. This led to historic negotiation, and finally, a new partnership. Let me explain them one by one. First, a failed diplomatic mission. In 1792, King George III sent a delegation to China. This was a famous Macartney mission. It was the very first ever diplomatic mission that Britain and even the entire Western world has dispatched to China. It was a prelude of an official contact between China and Britain and the rest of the Western country. The purpose of Macartney mission was to launch diplomatic relations between the 2 countries. The driving motivation of British was commercial. The rising industrial might of the UK needed new markets. So it was an obvious step to try and open Chinese markets for British products. Macartney made several requests to the Qing dynasty. One request was establishment of a British permanent embassy in Beijing. Another petition was opening some Chinese ports for British trade. Lord Macartney failed to attain his goals. His requests and proposals were declined. Emperor Qianlong wrote in his reply letter to King George III, appointing a representative at my court is a request contrary to our imperial dynastic rules and traditions, and is utterly impracticable. Emperor Qianlong added, our imperial virtue has penetrated into every country under heaven. Kings of all nations have offered their richest tributes by land and sea, and we have no use for your country's manufactures. Lord Macartney attributed his failure to poor translation. Of course, the best-known story about this diplomatic failure was the behavior of Lord Macartney. The court officials of the emperor made great efforts to brief Lord Macartney about Chinese court etiquette. Despite this advice, Lord Macartney refused to drop his knees when having an audience with Emperor Qianlong. So was it a failure of communication, as Lord Macartney thought? Some compare this encounter to a dialogue between a blind man and a deaf man. I think the answer is rather deeper. This was a failure of a fundamental clash of ideas. On one side was established power, and on the other was a rising power. There was no mutual respect and trust, a theme I will talk about later. At that time, Britain was a capitalist country where industrial revolution was forging ahead. It had little knowledge about China at that time, which was a closed and agrarian society. In addition, China was proud of being a celestial imperial dynasty. At that time, China had no interest and motivation to deal with a rapidly ascending Britain. China's leaders did not think there was any need to adapt to the changing world. Maybe I should mention the second in command of Macartney mission. This is Sir George Stanton. 2 years before he set for China mission, Oxford conferred on him an honorary degree of Doctor of Civil Law. Now let me turn to the second historic headline, an unjust war. In 1840, a war broke out between China and Britain. This war might be seen as a very minor incident in British history of external relations. It is known to British people as the First Anglo-Chinese War. It was a war triggered by conflicting trade interests. But if British history books record this as a minor footnote, it does not excuse the major and just nature of war. This was a fight based on British government defense of trade in opium smuggling. Even some UK politicians were appalled by actions of British government. In a debate of House of Commons, a young Tory MP, William Gladstone, spoke fervently against it. He said, "I do not know a war more unjust in its origin, a war more calculated to cover this country with a permanent disgrace." This unjust war ended with the defeat of China. Britain imposed an equal treaty and forced China to concede Hong Kong and open 5 ports for trade. Britain achieved with the gunboats what Macartney mission failed to secure. The Opium War has had a deep and long impact on China. It is widely accepted by historians as the beginning of China's contemporary history. In the 100 years that followed, China sunk to appalling levels of poverty and chaos. In 1840, China had a 30% share of global GDP. By 1940, this had collapsed to under 5%. Following the Opium War, China was plagued by both foreign aggression and a civil war. Its sovereignty was violated, its land was occupied. As a result, China-Britain relationship for a long time was not on equal footing. Every coin has 2 sides, so does history. The dire perils triggered by the Opium War helped wake up the Chinese people. They became aware that China must adapt to a changing world. The Industrial Revolution that started in Britain meant that every nation had to change. After many bitter sufferings, Chinese people learned the lesson. They started to open wide their eyes and look around the world. They began the search for a way to save and revive the Chinese nation. It was in this context that a revolution broke in China. The monarchy was overthrown, a republic was born. But it took another 4 decades before the foundations of stability were laid. It was with the foundation in 1949 of the People's Republic of China. The struggle to win the foundation was a bitter battle. It required Chinese people to study and accept the European and American modern science and ideas of democracy. Chinese people had to fight Japanese aggression for 8 years to win national independence. They imported Marxism and established Chinese Communist Party, and under its leadership found the People's Republic. The symbolisms of this struggle is at the heart of Tiananmen Square in Beijing. The inscriptions on the massive monument to people's heroes reads, "Long live the people's heroes over the years since 1840, who had fallen in the fights against internal and external enemies and for the independence of Chinese nation and for the happiness of the Chinese people." Note the specific reference to 1840, the starting year by Britain of the unjust Opium War. We now reach the 3rd historical headline, a well-timed diplomatic upgrading. After the founding of the People's Republic of China in 1949, China and Britain exchanged charge d'affaires in 1954. It was not a normal diplomatic relationship. It was referred to by historians as a half-diplomatic relationship. Such a relationship was a product of a Cold War. it was also due to some obstacles caused by the question of Taiwan. In 1972, great changes took place in global landscape. A key event was the visit to China by President Nixon, who was one of the speakers to this union. The visit meant that the thick ice between China and the United States was broken. At the same time, China-Britain relations were thawing. Britain recognized Chinese government position that Taiwan was a province of the People's Republic of China. The two countries signed a joint communique. This document was of great moment. It raised China-Britain relations to ambassadorial level. This normalized China-Britain relations. This was a vital turning point in Sino-UK relations. It symbolized a fresh start of mutual trust and equality and equal exchanges between the two countries. This year marks the 40 years of those full diplomatic relations between China and UK. Both sides have hosted many celebrations. When speaking at the reception at my embassy, I particularly mentioned a British leader, the former Prime Minister, Sir Edward Heath. Sir Edward deserves great credit for his huge role in making China-UK ambassadorial relations a reality. He also visited China 26 times in his lifetime. His dedication to China-Britain friendship earned him in China the title People's Envoy of Friendship. You will know from records and minutes of your Oxford Union that Sir Edward was both your secretary and librarian. In addition, I believe he made his mark as a debater here in the Union. Like so many others before, your Union was a political credo for him, just as it has been for many great political leaders. Perhaps it was here that he learned the values that inspired him very significant contribution to Sino-UK relations. We now reach the fourth headline, historical negotiation. In spite of the establishment of ambassadorial relations, there was still outstanding issue between China and UK, that is Hong Kong. It was an issue left over from Opium War that I mentioned earlier. The thrust of the issue was that China wanted Hong Kong back, but Britain wanted to maintain its interest in Hong Kong. After 22 rounds of hard negotiations, the two governments signed in Beijing in 1984 the Joint Declaration over Hong Kong. It provided that China would resume the exercise of sovereignty over Hong Kong on 1st July 1997. There was also a policy of one China, one country, two systems that would be applied in Hong Kong after its return. The resolution of Hong Kong question was a major milestone in China-UK relations. It is important in many ways. First, it resolved a big historical issue that went back to the Opium War. It laid the foundation for the long-term growth of China-UK relations. Second, it created a model for China's peaceful reunification. After Hong Kong model, China and Portugal smoothly resolved Macau issue. Third, it set a record of settling international disputes from peaceful negotiations. For two countries like China and Britain, resolving a sensitive and complex territorial issue through peaceful negotiations was a remarkable achievement. It has far-reaching historic significance to China and UK. It is also highly relevant and instructive to the world today. For example, one Asian country is attempting to challenge the principles of Charter of United Nations and post-war international order. Its unilateral actions have violated consensus reached between the relevant countries on peaceful settlement of territorial disputes. This ancient country should be inspired by the success story created by China and Britain. In the historic settlement of Hong Kong question, another alumna of Oxford played a prominent role with her wisdom and decisiveness. This was Prime Minister Thatcher, the Iron Lady. I know that she also shared her wisdom here as a guest speaker at your Oxford Union. Finally, we have the fifth headline, a new type of partnership. Since the dawn of a new century, the world had witnessed extraordinary events in China. The result has brought about great changes in economic strength and international status and role of China. Thanks to the hard efforts over the 30 decades since reform and opening up, China has surged to be the world's second largest economy. For over 3 decades, China has sustained an annual growth rate of 9.9%. This was an unmatched success that the world economy has ever known. At the same time, China has taken an active part in international affairs. China has risen from a regional power, as the developed countries used to see it, to a global power. As a result, it is now inconceivable that any global issue could be resolved without the active participation and support of China. Against such drawback, despite the divergence in history, culture, development stages, and social system, our two countries have come remarkably close in our relations. The breakthrough was the establishment of a new type of partnership. In 1998, China and Britain embarked on comprehensive partnership. In 2004, it was further enriched and elevated to a comprehensive strategic partnership. Our relationship is based on our shared interests. This approach answers the call of age we live in. Today, China-UK relations are flourishing. China and Britain have put in place the economic and financial dialogue, the strategic dialogue, high-level people-to-people dialogue. These are the 3 pillars of our relations. Our economic ties are growing fast. In 2011, China-UK bilateral trade in goods totaled nearly $60 billion. That was 200 times of that in 1972. Every year, more than 1 million of our people visit each other's country for travel, work, or study. China has become the #1 source of foreign students in this country. Of course, our two countries do not see eye to eye with each other on every issue. However, we can resolve issues as we maintain close communication and consultation. Our relationship has never been so deep and so extensive. Talking about our new partnership, I must mention another graduate of Oxford. This is former Prime Minister Tony Blair. I'm told that he was active in Oxford Union. Like Sir Edward, he is also office holder here. During Tony Blair's 11 years as a Prime Minister, development of China-UK relations was both fast and positive. He recognized the strategic significance by establishing his Prime Minister's China Task Force. Of course, we should not forget that incumbent Prime Minister is also from Oxford. Young friends, so far I've given you an overview of multifaceted China-Britain relations with 5 headlines. This year is the 220th anniversary of McCartney's mission to China. From 220 years of China-Britain exchanges, we witnessed an upward trajectory that moved from estrangement to understanding, from hostility to friendship, from rivalry to cooperation, and from negative to positive. It is not a straight line, because our relations went through ups and downs, but it did not and cannot change the overriding trend of China-UK relations. A very famous ancient Chinese saying is, "Take history as a mirror, and you will understand why dynasties rise and fall." Coming to Europe, Victor Hugo said, "What is history? An echo of the past in the future, a reflex from the future on the past." Both these Chinese and European quotations reflect similar thinking. So, taking a historical view, what lessons can we learn as we take stock of China-Britain relations of the past more than 2 centuries? In my view, the most important lessons we should learn is mutual respect and treating each other as equals. This is also a fundamental principle that China upholds and insists on in its foreign policy. All unpleasant memories of China-Britain relations show lack of respect and equality. This is the basis of failure of my Macartney mission and the tragedy of Opium War. All positive progress of our relations were achieved through mutual respect and equality. These are seen in the diplomatic upgrading, the smooth handover of Hong Kong, the launch of new partnership. So we may well conclude that respect and equality is the heart and soul of China-UK relations. Then how can China-Britain truly respect each other and treat each other as equals in the world today? I believe it is essential to do the following. First, respect each other's national realities, such as a history, culture, development stage, and social system. There are many differences in evolution of our 2 nations. China has a history of 5,000 years. Britain was a pathfinder of modern industrialization. Confucianism is deep in Chinese people's genes. Britons have a tradition of pragmatism. Britain is the birthplace of modern capitalism and is a developed Western nation. China follows socialism with the Chinese characteristics. China is the largest developing country. These are the basic facts of our 2 countries. We must be aware of and respect our differences. We should respect each other's development path. We should respect our respective choices. Only through this kind of respect can China and Britain become equal partners. Only through this kind of regard can our countries establish and develop a comprehensive strategic partnership between countries like China and Britain, which differs in history, culture, social and political systems. The second essential, as we move forward, is respect each other's interests, especially core interests. You will be familiar with the famous song, Rule Britannia. This song is almost famous like national anthem for Britons. In one of the verses, the song says, "Britons never, never, never shall be slaves." Both our countries reflect pride in our culture and resistance to domination of others. So it should not be surprised. The first line of Chinese national anthem, March of the Volunteers, says, "Arise, the people who refuse to be slaves." These words reflect how Chinese people refused to accept the humiliation and loss of sovereignty that followed from the Opium War. Following the Opium War, China had been brought to its knees, and Chinese nation endured untold sufferings. Today's China and Chinese people cherish national independence and freedom. We value sovereignty and territorial integrity more than anything else. China does not allow violation and interference from anyone on the issue that concerns China's sovereignty and territorial integrity, because these are our core interests. There are more than enough such historical lessons between China and Britain. We must prevent reoccurrence of such unfortunate incidents. History is an essential guide. One famous British historian, Arnold Toynbee, was also an alumnus of Oxford University. Arnold Toynbee predicted that 21st century would be Chinese century. Of course, this should not be interpreted as the 21st century belongs solely to China. Rather, I think it means China will accomplish more in the 21st century. I'm confident that as China increasingly prospers, the future of China-Britain relations will have more opportunities. We should be committed to a new type of China-Britain partnership I've described. In summary, these are the crucial points to define this relationship: political mutual respect, shared trust, and economic win-win cooperation, reciprocal learning about each other's culture, and greater coordination and cooperation in international affairs. If these goals are realized, then the pattern of history suggests our two countries and peoples will benefit enormously. 220 years ago, King George III wrote in his letter to Chinese Emperor Qianlong, "No time can be so propitious for extending the bonds of friendship and benevolence, and for proposing to communicate and receive those benefits, which must result from unreserved and amicable intercourse between such great and civilized nations as China and Great Britain." Due to the confines of historical conditions, King George's wish did not come true. But in this new era, great nations such as China and Britain have much to offer the world. Both countries should use their immense skills and resources to deliver a common goal. This is a shared objective of creating a sustainable and peaceful world for all humanity. Oxford alumni have been critical to the past of China-UK relations. I do believe you, students of Oxford, also have a huge role to play in these relations' future. This is why I've joined you here today. I do hope my reflections on history will inspire you to follow the spirit of times, undertake your responsibilities and mission. I hope you will work with the young generation of China to compose new chapters of China-UK relations. Thank you.